Welcome, field instructors. On behalf of Memorial University School of Social Work, we would like to thank you for investing your time and energy to help provide a field opportunity for our Bachelor of Social Work students. This is their first practicum, and in the university calendar, this is noted as Social Work 3300. We thank you for working with us this semester to mentor students and to help them on their next steps to their social work career. We hope that this orientation answers any questions you may have. If not, feel free to reach out to a member of the field education team and we would be happy to help you. On the bottom right of the video, you will notice a QR code. Feel free to scan the code if you would like a PDF version of the presentation. Throughout the orientation, we'll be talking about an overview of field education, what it is, what do students learn, and what you need to know, the roles of field instructors and agency mentors, the orientation to the practicum, requirements during the practicum and expectations of students and field instructors and agency mentors, and recording requirements. You'll also learn about where to find key resources, forms, and templates, the evaluations to be completed, and how to get answers to any questions you may have. Field education is known as social work's signature pedagogy. Signature pedagogy represents a central form of instruction and learning in which a profession, such as social work, socializes its students to perform the role of practitioner. Field education is a component of the curriculum in which students achieve understanding of the relevance of theory to practice and begin to develop competence in using their values, knowledge, and skills. So this really is the first opportunity for students to move from the classroom setting into the field and into practice. As you can see in the diagram developed by Larkin, we have three cogs. One is field, one is classroom, and one is competent generalist practitioner. And what that means is that for social work, as a profession, we have the classroom education, but we also have field education. So a social worker cannot truly be educated without having both in their training. Field education truly is a critical bridge between social work education and practice. This is the opportunity for students to take the critical knowledge, skills, and values they've learned in the classroom and then move through their practicums to strengthen and further develop their skills and knowledge in the field. Further information about the purposes and objectives of field education can be found in section 1.2 of the Field Education Manual. There are a few key things to consider in regards to the purposes and objectives of field education. As mentioned, further details can be found in section 1.2 of the Field Education Manual. An important element of field practicums is that the practicum experience is not just about doing tasks and learning the specific job at an agency or specific forms that need to be completed. These aspects can change 100 times throughout a social worker's career. BSW Field Practicums are instead designed to serve as an educational rather than a training or work experience. Field education is about learning to become a social worker. Practicums and field instruction assist students in making the transition from active learners to professional social workers, with professional socialization being a primary focus of field education, as students develop a professional self-concept. Field education is also the critical component of the curriculum in which students achieve understanding of the relevance of theory to practice and begin to develop competence in using their values, knowledge, and skills. During the practicum, students are expected to further develop professional values, professional identity, relationship building skills, and skills in the art of helping. It is also important to know that both the BSW and MSW field programs at Memorial are designed to ensure the field practicum meet the Canadian Association of Social Work Education, or CASWE, standards for accreditation. So if you're looking for some more information on CASWE, please check out their website, and we have attached a link there for you. Let's talk a few minutes about the many different people that you as well as students will come in contact with during the field education experience. First, there's the field education coordinators here at the school. So we are the people who help coordinate and arrange practicums from the start to the end of the process. Your field liaison is a person who is assigned to you and your student throughout the term, who will be in contact with you and the student at various points to see how things are going. If there are any questions or concerns, more than likely one of the field education coordinators here at the school will be your field liaison, and you'll be advised as to who that person is. As well, some agencies do have an agency coordinator, especially agencies in which we may have more than one field instructor. And so, for example, in a health organization such as Eastern Health, the professional practice consultant is the agency coordinator. As well, there is a field instructor. Every student has a field instructor, and that person is responsible for providing the weekly field instruction, as well as completing the evaluations that are required at the midterm and at the final. The agency mentor, some agencies don't have a social worker on site, and they would certainly have an agency mentor, and that person is going to be responsible for the day-to-day activities of the student. The university will provide an off-site field instructor in agencies where there is no social worker on site. As well, a student is a registered student here at Memorial University, and service users are clients, community members, volunteers, etc. that use services within the community. Just some things for field instructors to keep in mind prior to the start of the practicum. Our academic program assistant will send you a confirmation of agreement form. You can complete that and return it to them. If you're a new field instructor or agency mentor, our academic program assistant will also send the field instructor and agency mentor information form to you. This form does not need to be completed every semester, but if there is any changes to the information, you can update the form and send it to our academic program assistant. It is also helpful to take the time to read over the BSW Field Practicum checklist for field instructors and agency mentors, as well as the BSW Field Education Manual and the Field Education Resource Manual. These 3 documents contain everything you will need to know throughout the practicum and will be a great resource for you if you have any questions before or during the practicum. We have told students to complete all agency requirements before they can start the practicum and to meet any deadlines set by the agency for submitting the required documentation. This can include a certificate of conduct, vulnerable sector check, etc. It is also helpful to identify the types of activities appropriate for the student to be involved with during the practicum. A 350-hour practicum may sound long, but it is amazing how fast it flies by. Having an initial plan in place helps the practicum get off to a good start. The plan will certainly evolve and change as the practicum starts, but it's always good to have an initial plan in place. Another thing to keep in mind is arranging space, supplies, and an agency orientation for the student. We will speak more to the agency orientation in a moment. The field team will also be providing updates to students through their MUN email, so we have asked them to keep an eye on their MUN email before and during their practicum. So here are some important things for you to know about the practicum. The practicum is normally 4 days per week. This can be altered if the field instructor, student, and school agree. This usually works out to be Monday to Thursday or Tuesday to Friday. It may change depending on the agency. The student will work out their schedule with their field instructor and agency mentor if applicable. Most students work a typical 8:30 to 4:30 or 9 to 5 arrangement, but some students may complete practicum hours in the evenings and weekends, and that is perfectly fine. During the practicum, students will follow the schedule of the agency, which means they will not have a midterm break. To meet accreditation standards, students must complete 350 hours during each of their practicums. They have to complete a total of 350 hours in the practicum, which does not include stat holidays, missed times, sick leave, lunch, or snowstorms. If students are away from their practicum for more than a week, then they should inform their field liaison of their absence. Special absences should also be discussed with the field liaison and the field instructor in advance. So if they know at the beginning of the term that they have a wedding in a town, they need to take a few days off, that needs to be discussed with the field instructor and field liaison in advance. The practicum is usually 11 to 13 weeks. Under certain circumstances, practicums can be longer than 13 weeks. However, they cannot be less than 11 weeks. In other words, students cannot say, I'm going to do 40 hours a week in the practicum so I can finish really early. That's not going to happen, since they have to allow time and process for learning and education to occur. If they have more than 350 hours before the 11 weeks, then they still have to wait until 11 weeks in order to complete the practicum. We have also reminded students to keep in mind that other activities such as part-time employment and volunteer work can't take precedence over their practicum. Field instructors and agencies don't have to agree to change the agency schedule to accommodate student outside employment. Field instruction does count as part of 350 hours that they have to complete. While students are completing their first practicum, they will be doing a course which is Social Work 3311, Social Work Integration of Theory and Practice. Keep in mind that this course does not count as part of the 350 required practicum hours. Students should not be working on this course during practicum hours. Since their practicum is usually 4 days a week, they will have one extra day during the week to work on their course. Students need to know a lot of information, especially on their first day, and as you well know, they can be quite anxious when they are first starting out. So some of the things we have laid out on the slide are basic things that we think would be helpful for you to be able to discuss with your student at the beginning of their practicum. The first thing would be to provide them with some information about the agency and the setting. Things such as where do they park their car, what door do they come into, what are the hours of lunch, can they have lunch there, where do they eat lunch, what office or workstation will they be working in, all those things. Just some basic things like that that you can think of. Some agencies may have a checklist that students need to know or do. If that is available, it would be helpful for the agency, for the student to have. In some larger organizations, some students may also have an orientation students may need to attend, or learning modules they may need to complete. The student will also need to know the key contact people they need to meet with and be familiar with in the agency. So that could be your reception administration staff, supervisors, other staff that we be working with, as well as volunteers. Students having access to an organizational chart, if available, can also be very helpful. Safety is a key component of any orientation. Most agencies will have some formal processes in place around fire and safety and those sorts of things. It is important for students to be aware of this information and what to do in an emergency situation. What to do if there is a fire or other medical or in a medical emergency or a situation such as violence. It is also important for students to become familiar with agency policies. Some agencies may have formal agency policy manual. It's important for students to be able to go through it and take a look at it. We've suggested to students to jot down any questions they may have questions about. It is completely understandable that they're not going to be familiar with everything after looking at a policy manual, but they also may be able to look at some things, write down some questions, and then it may have more relevance for them later on in the placement. Agency etiquette is also very important for students to know. What is the dress code? What's appropriate to say when they answer the phone? What's the appropriate response to clients on certain questions? So all those kinds of things. Visiting relevant agency partners is a helpful part of the student's orientation process to an agency. Students can complete these visits where possible with prior approval from their field instructor and agency mentor. There's no minimum number of agencies to visit. In the past, we've had students say to us, oh, it says somewhere that we have to go to 10 agencies. That's not true, but what is the case is that they need to discuss with their field instructor and agency mentor when they are doing their learning contract is what agencies are most appropriate and relevant for them to find more information about. What agencies are relevant to the work of the agency, the population of the agency, what agencies do you refer to or work closely with? Some agencies may provide an on-site agency visit, while others may provide more of an information session virtually. Now we're going to talk about the student requirements during the field practicum. Please refer to the BSW Field Manual for further details. All practicum students have to complete learning tasks in number 1, as described in the BSW Field Manual under section 2.6.2a. Students will do number 1 plus one other learning task as described in the manual, either number 2 or number 3, depending on the type of practicum they are completing. What are the learning tasks from number 1? First off, all students have to do one verbal presentation to the field agency, and that could be just the field instructor and agency mentor, or it could include the staff team, executive director, could be volunteers, could be community partners, could be a board of directors. The presentation is something we often get questions about from students and field instructors. There is a lot of flexibility with the topic of the presentation, so students and field instructors can be creative, not only to meet the students' learning goals, but to meet a need of the agency as well. It has to be at least 20 minutes in length, and you and the student will agree on what that topic is going to be. Many times the field instructor or agency mentor or another member of the team may have some items that have been sitting on the side of their desk that they haven't been able to get to. These pieces of work are often great learning for a student. If students are completing a project, researching a topic or a policy for the agency, that can also be the topic of their presentation, so keep that in mind. For example, if students are doing research on trauma-informed practice, then they can do a presentation to their team about trauma-informed practice. Or if students are doing an environmental scan of what similar agencies are doing nationally, then they can present their findings. Some students have also planned team-building activities and ran those activities for the team. Other students may be involved in developing a program or policy analysis, and that can be the presentation as well. The options are pretty much endless. They can also partner with another student to complete their presentation. They would just have to make sure that each of them present for around 20 minutes or so. If you have any questions about the presentation, don't hesitate to reach out to your field liaison. We would also like students to attend agency meetings, in-service sessions, anything at all that is related to the agency, wherever possible and as appropriate. Learning tasks from number 2 would be completed by field settings engaged with work with individuals, families, or groups. These students will be working with a minimum of 5 service users throughout the term and are participating in group work. They potentially will be working with more than 5 service users, but it would be a minimum of 5, and the length of time working with service user could be a very short period of time depending on the agency and its mandate, or it could be a longer period of time throughout the term, and that is perfectly fine as well. Students would also engage in at least one project. As mentioned, it's important to keep in mind that the project can inform their presentation. The project and presentation do not have to be connected, but many students do connect their project and presentation. As with the presentation, there's a lot of flexibility with this project. Senior student can be creative. Students can do a community development project, policy analysis, research, program development, proposal writing, and committee work. The project typically not only meets some of the students' learning goals, but also can build upon capacity within an agency. Many field instructors and agency mentors have items that they would like to get to, and this is a great opportunity to not only meet students' needs, but also the needs of your agency and team. Is there a topic or resources your team would like to know more about? Are there policies or programs that need to be updated? Is your agency trying to do an environmental scan of what other similar agencies are doing? Are you trying to develop resources for your clients, such as posters, pamphlets, or social media or website content? Is there a proposal that you've been trying to get to and don't have time to write? Or projects on a committee that you haven't been able to get to? All these examples are excellent learning opportunities for students. As with the presentation, the project options are really quite endless. For number 2, there's an intervention list of things students could be doing with direct service users, just to give you an idea, and that is located in the MUN BSW Field Manual if you want to go back and do more reading. So they could be doing assessment, referral, resource coordination, support counseling, adjustment counseling, change focus counseling, psychoeducational interventions, could be addictions counseling, could be group work, case management, could be discharge planning, couples counseling, family counseling, social or life skills work, grief or loss counseling, art or play therapy. So that just gives you an indication of some of the interventions students could be doing with direct service users. There is no limit as to the amount of time or interventions that they have to spend with a client. We recognize that every agent is very different. So now let's talk a little bit about the learning tasks for number 3. These are field settings engaged in work-related organizations, communities, and/or policies. So different from number 2. Students in organizations, communities, and policies have opportunities to use assessment, intervention, and termination skills in at least 2 of the following categories. It could be program planning, implementation or evaluation, coalition formulation, advocacy, community analysis, needs assessment, leadership development, community organizing, community capacity building, policy analysis or development, team or board work, social policy research, staff development, plan change techniques, resource development, public education, and presentations. All of these things are listed in the MUN BSW Field Manual if you want more information. So when you sit down with a student to look at their learning contract and what they're going to be doing, they're going to be identifying that they're going to be doing work in at least 2 of these areas. We are now going to talk about expectations of all students completing their practicum. We expect that students are going to participate actively in their own learning in the practicum. We expect them to ask questions, be curious, put themselves outside their comfort zone, take on as many learning opportunities as possible to meet their individual learning goals, and ask for feedback and be open to feedback. We also expect students to complete the agency's orientation, assignments, and observe agency policies. We also expect students to preserve confidentiality. They will also be providing written reports and records as documented within the agency, and we are expecting them to meet the CASW Code of Ethics. During the practicum, students will be completing a student self-assessment, learning contract, and have a number of recording requirements. We will discuss these expectations in more depth shortly. Throughout the practicum, students will also be expected to participate in the evaluation of self and the learning process. We also expect students to participate in the evaluation of the field practicum. They will be completing an evaluation of the practicum following their final evaluation. During the field practicum, students' learning is based on 5 outcomes or expectation areas. They are field setting and community context, teaching and learning context, theory and practice, self-awareness, and professional context. When you, the student, will be looking at the learning contract, which we'll be talking about shortly, it is based on these 5 areas or outcomes that students are expected to develop some knowledge and skill in. Further detailed information can also be found in Section 1.6 of the Field Education Manual. We do have expectations of field instructors, and we are going to let you know what those are. The field instructor assumes a major teaching role with students in the integration of theory and practice in the field. They facilitate student learning through introduction of new theories, knowledge, and research developments relevant to social work practice in the field setting. The field instructor usually assigns work to students, particularly if they are the on-site field instructor. This could involve the selection of cases, groups, and other activities to provide appropriate learning experiences for students. Field instructors also have to make the time to be a field instructor. Part of this involves working with students to develop a learning contract, as well as meeting at least once a week for field instruction. Field instruction should be an hour and a half per week. A block of time is preferable. We know sometimes this can be very challenging, but in terms of learning and discussing and reflecting, a block of time is ideal. Field instructors must review the weekly critical reflections and other required recordings to discuss student learning. Field instructors also provide consultation and supervision of tasks as needed. They review student documentation and reports and evaluate student performance. They are also required to be in consultation with the field liaison throughout the semester to provide regular updates on how students are doing in their practicum. The field liaison will be in touch with you a minimum of 3 times throughout the semester, typically at the beginning, around midterm, and at the end of placement. If you have any questions or concerns, please let the field liaison know. If you have any concerns, we would expect that there will be a process where field instructors are working with students and identifying if there are concerns. In an agency where we do not have an on-site field instructor, we usually have an agency mentor. They will provide day-to-day supervision and guidance for a student. We would also expect them to be involved and work in a collaborative way with the field instructor to ensure a rich experience for students. They may assign work to the student as well in consultation with the field instructor, which may include selection of service recipients to work with, projects, and other experiences. They may provide consultation and supervision of tasks as needed. They may review student documentation reports. They also may monitor student progress and collaborate and consult regarding the student's performance. We would also expect agency mentors to assist with the orientation process for students and ensure students have access to the resources needed within the agency. We previously discussed the various roles of those involved in field education. Scherer and Peleg-Oren used the term learning triangle to bring clarity to those involved in the field education process. The learning triangle was elaborated on by Larkin to create a visual similar to that on the slide. On the slide is a Venn diagram with 3 overlapping circles. One circle is the university, with roles such as field education coordinator and field liaison. Another circle is the student, and the other circle is the agency, with roles of field instructor and agency mentor if applicable. The concept identified that all those involved in field education, the university, the student, and the agency play a part in developing the professional social worker. This is one of the unique aspects of field education. All these vital players have unique roles, responsibilities, and expectations, yet come together to function as a whole to form the basis and vision of field education. So, social work's signature pedagogy. You're probably wondering, where do I find things? On the school's field website below, there are a number of helpful resources available, such as the BSW Field Education Manual, checklist for field instructors and agency mentors, checklist for students, and the guide to completing the learning contract. There is also a field education resource manual that our academic program assistant will email to you, which is a great help in weekly field instruction. It contains information about theories, values, skills, as well as templates for recordings. A number of the forms can also be found on the school's website, such as the student self-assessment, weekly critical reflection, and the midterm reflection. The rest of the forms are completed in our online database, IPT, which we'll talk about in a moment. There's a really helpful field instructor course available online. It usually takes about 8 to 10 hours and can be used for continuing education credits when renewing the registration. For more information, please contact our academic program assistant. Our Intern Practicum Tracking Database, or IPT for short, is a database that allows students, field instructors, agency mentors, and field education coordinators to efficiently and effectively complete administrative tasks related to field education. This includes keeping relevant practicum and contact information up to date and accessing and completing forms online. We have a helpful IPT manual and IPT tutorial videos available that should hopefully give you a good overview of how to use IPT and complete the field practicum forms. They are available on the school's field education website. We also ask the students keep their emergency contact up to date in IPT in case you need to contact them. Hopefully that won't happen, but it's good to know the information is there just in case. The forms completed in IPT by the student and field instructor include the timesheet and supervision record, the learning contract, midterm evaluation, final evaluation, and both the student and the field instructor complete an evaluation of the practicum. So let's talk a bit about the student self-assessment. As mentioned, the student self-assessment template can be found on the school's field education website. The student submits a completed form to their field instructor prior to the first field instruction meeting, so typically 24 hours in advance. This self-assessment is really crucial since it's really the foundation of the learning contract. The self-assessment really gives students a chance to reflect on what they're hoping to learn in the practicum, what they bring to the practicum, things they may find challenging, and their coping strategies, and how their field instructor can best support their learning. Discussing this information with the field instructor also helps set a foundation of having a positive learning experience during their practicum. It's also really helpful for starting the conversation of how the field instructor could best support the students' learning. We've asked students to really think about what learning opportunities have been helpful for them in the past. What supports do they need? Are they typically someone who likes to jump right into things, or would they prefer to do some reading and planning or observing and then try it out themselves? Everyone learns differently in different situations, and this can change over time. The student self-assessment will give you and the student a place to start the conversation, but it is certainly helpful to keep that open communication throughout their practicum. Field instruction is an excellent opportunity for this. We've asked students to let you know what has been helpful for their learning or what may be more helpful moving forward. This is really a part of the adult learning theory and taking more of that self-directed approach to their own learning experience. Something to keep in mind is that the student self-assessment only needs to be submitted to the field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable. It is important for students to retain a copy, however, in case it is requested by the field team. So let's now talk about the learning contract. The learning contract is a user-friendly document. It is basically a plan that outlines field learning and is agreed upon by the field instructor and the student and the agency mentor, if applicable. It outlines the responsibilities for the student and the field instructor. It assists in the formulation of individualized evaluation plans, and it ensures appropriate opportunities to learn and ensures there are appropriate opportunities to demonstrate competence in each of the evaluation criteria. The learning contract is available through IPT. We have put in examples of activities that demonstrate each one of the outcomes and objectives. Students can leave it as is if it meets everything they need, or you and the student can add in additional activities in the additional learning activities section. We have said to students that it is helpful to push themselves to come up with additional learning activities. These could be specific to the client population they are working with, the agency, or their own personal learning goals. As you will see in IPT, the learning contract also contains the midterm and final evaluations. So at the end of the practicum, students can look back at the learning contract and it will give a great overview of what they learned and how they did throughout the term. As previously mentioned, there is a guide to completing the learning contract on the field education website. So now let's talk a bit about recording expectations during the term. Clarification of these recordings can be found under section 2.10 of the BSW Field Manual. We will also provide further information regarding these recording expectations on other slides. We will discuss the timesheet and supervision record, the daily log, the weekly critical reflections, other field notes or reports as required, as well as the minimum of 6 examples of service recipient work that will be evaluated by the field instructor. The first type of recording students must do on their practicum is their timesheet and supervision record, which is found in IPT. Additional information regarding IPT can be found in the BSW IPT manual, which is found on the field education website. Here is an example of what the timesheet and supervision record looks like in IPT. We've asked students to follow the directions carefully. They will be recording their time in their practicum as well as their supervision time with their field instructor each week. As noted in IPT, in the hours of practice rows, students record the total number of hours they were at their practicum each day. In the hours of supervision rows, students record the number of hours they've received field instruction each week. Students should have a minimum of 1.5 hours of dedicated field instruction time per week. They do not need to record informal daily supervision, only their weekly field instruction block. Their hours of supervision should already be counted in their hours of practice so they don't count twice. Students keep track of their hours. At the midterm and final, the timesheet and supervision record are electronically signed in IPT by the student, field instructor, or field instructors, and the agency mentor if applicable. Students are expected to keep a daily log during their practicum. Daily logs are designed to assist students in tracking their activities on a daily basis. They are also quite helpful during field instruction. There is no set format for a daily log. However, students often use an electronic calendar or diary such as Outlook Calendar or may use a written daily planner. Students can discuss their preferred format for the daily log with their field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable. The daily logs are only viewed by the field instructor and agency mentor, except in exceptional circumstances where the field liaison would have access. Now let's talk about the weekly critical reflections, which is really the basis of field instruction. Each week, students will complete a weekly critical reflection. Reflective practice is an essential aspect of good social work practice. The weekly critical reflection is intended to provide students with opportunities to engage in and develop good habits in reflective practice, opportunities to define their professional development and learning needs in an open, candid, and self-analytical manner. Also, through reviewing the weekly critical reflections, they provide field instructors and agency mentors with guidance in reference to student learning needs and professional development. That is why it is important for students to give the field instructor plenty of time to review the material. We've let students know that if they give it to you right before the session, it's not going to be particularly helpful for them during field instruction because field instructors need time to reflect upon the comments that students have made as well. Students can work out an arrangement with you, but we usually recommend students provide the field instructor with the weekly critical reflection 24 hours in advance of field instruction. The weekly critical reflections only need to be submitted to the field instructor and agency mentor if applicable. It is important for students to keep copies of them, however, in case the field team requests a copy of them. A template of a weekly critical reflection tool is available on the field education website. You and the student will also find the field education resource manual that our academic program assistant will email to you is going to be a big help when it comes to students completing their weekly critical reflections. The field education resource manual can also be helpful during field instruction sessions as it contains a lot of helpful material for you and the student. There is flexibility with the weekly critical reflections. There are various critical reflection tools out there, and you and the student can alter the weekly critical reflections to best meet student learning needs. You and the student may also focus on some areas of critical reflection more one week than another, or may wish to alter the questions to strengthen their critical reflection skills. As a field instructor, you may also have additional reflection questions that you may want to share with the student, or the student may want to try out a particular model of reflection. In regards to the content of the weekly critical reflection, some important things for students to consider and questions to ask themselves in their weekly critical reflection include, so it might be the summary of student learning. What did you learn the past week about your agency, service recipients? What did you learn about your role and the roles of others in the field setting or community? Students will also want to incorporate a description and examples of theory, values, knowledge, interventions, and skills used. So when did you integrate the code of ethics into your practice? When did you use social work skills or interprofessional skills? When did you demonstrate knowledge and skill in collegial or collaborative practice? What social work interventions did you use? What interprofessional interventions did you use? What theories did you use in your practice? What theories may you use moving forward? Did anything conflict with your personal values? What did you learn about the agency's values? Students will also want to consider the strengths demonstrated by and challenges encountered in relation to any aspect of activities or tasks. So are there things that you believe you did well this week? Are there things you are happy about, proud of? Are there challenges that you faced? Are there things you may want to be doing differently in the future? Are there things you want to learn more about? What were their feelings, impressions, and personal reactions to any aspects of activities or tasks? So was there anything that made you uncomfortable? Was there anything that challenged you? How did a certain situation make you feel? Why did you feel that way? How do you think it made the other person feel? Are there certain situations or people you think about? Anything that keeps you up at night or that you can't turn off at the end of the day? What moments were happy for you? Anything confusing? They'll also want to reflect on political and structural factors and power dynamics, such as what political, structural, or systemic factors or barriers influence service recipients, the field setting, or their practice. Were there any themes or concerns or issues individuals faced? What power dynamics did you notice? They'll also want to make note of any developments and insights in their self-awareness. So what did you learn about yourself this past week? Where does my knowledge come from? What did you learn from a certain situation? What do I now know that I didn't know before? What impact did I have on a certain situation? And what impact did it have on me? And what did you realize you don't know or what you need to learn more about? In addition, it is important for students to have questions for the field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable, and points for discussion for the upcoming field instruction session. Any of the points above are excellent pieces to discuss during field instruction. Students may also want to wish to explore other questions and bring up various other discussion points, such as any immediate or crisis situations you'd like to address, what additional learning opportunities they would like to try. Did you encounter any ethical dilemmas this past week? What aspect of a learning contract did you want to discuss? So it's pretty much endless. Many students find the weekly critical reflection template to meet their needs, but as you can see, the types of critical reflection questions really are endless. The main thing is that students are challenging themselves in the vital skill of critical reflection and providing a weekly written piece of work to their field instructor. At most agency settings, students will be required by field settings to complete agency documentation such as field setting notes or reports. These pieces of documentation would be placed on service recipient or other agency files and would follow the agency stipulated format. We have asked students to keep some important things in mind. Agency documentation is the property of the field setting. Agency documentation focuses on the delivery of service and tends to be written in a summary style, whereas other types of recordings focus more on highlighting and enhancing student development. Agency documentation must be read and signed by field instructors and agency mentors for legal purposes. Also, review by field instructors and agency mentors assist students in developing a professional social work writing style appropriate for agency and organization records and other written communications, such as reports, letters, memos, or minutes. Whether or not required by the field setting, students may include a limited number of field setting pieces of documentation in the required 6 examples of service recipient work. In other words, pieces of agency documentation can count as up to 4 of their 6 examples of service recipient work. If they use the agency documentation as 1 or more of their examples of service recipient work, it is still important for them to engage in critical reflection as part of that process, such as during field instruction with their field instructor. All students in all field settings are required to complete at least 6 examples of service recipient work. These recordings can be submitted to their field instructor and agency mentor if applicable. It is important for students to keep copies of these records in case the field team requests a copy of them. We ask the students include at least 3 different types. In other words, students can complete all the same type. Examples of service recipient work include agency documentation, audio recordings, community assessments, critical analysis of meetings, event planning and coordination, group work recordings, observation and analysis of intervention, process recordings, program or project recordings, reflection on direct observations, summary recordings, and video recordings. Detailed information about these examples of service recipient work can be found in 2.10.3 of the BSW Field Manual. Templates can also be found in the Field Education Resource Manual. As with the weekly critical reflections, these are only templates and can be adjusted to best meet student learning needs. The main thing is that the students are practicing the essential social work skill of critical reflection. Students may find other templates that work better to meet their needs or the situation they are critically reflecting on. Or you and the student may develop a template that works for the both of you. Also, we remind students to please not leave these recordings until the end of the practicum. It's best to try to aim to get half of them done before the midterm and the other half following the midterm. Students will be very stressed if they have to submit 6 at the end. Also, the other piece is that they are part of the learning process, so students need to get that feedback, the opportunity to work on them, and improve their skills and knowledge. The remaining slides will discuss the evaluations that are completed during the practicum. Additional information about the evaluations can be found in section 2.11.4 in the BSW Field Education Manual. These evaluations include the midterm evaluation of the student, the final evaluation of the student, and the field instructor and agency mentor evaluation of the field practicum. So let's just talk a little bit more about the evaluations of the student. Evaluation is one of those words for a lot of people that starts an anxiety process, and students are no exception to that. Students are often very anxious about the evaluation, and they want to know that they are doing okay and as well where they need to improve. It's also important to remember that the evaluation starts with a learning contract, so it actually does start with their first week of the agency. Although the midterm and the final are the formal evaluation periods, evaluation is meant to be an ongoing process. We have let students know that completing their weekly critical reflections are an excellent time to reflect on their own progress. Weekly field instruction sessions are also a great time for the student and field instructor to check in and for students to get feedback on their strengths, areas they can grow, and where they are in this practicum process. Ideally, any feedback at the midterm and final evaluation shouldn't be a surprise if the student, field instructor, and agency mentor are engaged in open communication throughout the practicum. We've mentioned to students that it also really comes back to them approaching the practicum as an adult learner, engaging in their own critical reflection, seeing where they are with the learning contract, strengthening their self-awareness, and asking and being open to feedback, not just from their field instructor, but from other team members as well. We will get into the midterm and final evaluation processes in the following slides. However, it is important to know that the field instructor is responsible for writing the evaluation. Evaluation for both the midterm and final evaluation are based on a number of factors. It's based on the student self-assessment form that students do in the beginning, their learning contract, student daily logs, weekly critical reflections, and other required recordings, and agency documentation that they do. It could be their midterm reflection. We also look at the School of Social Work Suitability Policy. If you're not familiar with that policy, you can go check it out at the Field Education webpage. It also involves student performance, so how are they doing? Agency feedback, which could come from other team members, volunteers, and possibly even clients, and as well as the SCWK Code of Ethics. As a field instructor, you possess a lot of great skills and knowledge, including assessment and intervention skills, knowledge of the practice area, critical thinking skills, and critical reflection skills. All of these skills and knowledge that you possess will aid you in the evaluation process of the student. Let's talk a bit about the rating scale that we use on the midterm and final evaluation. As you know with the learning contract, the midterm and final is all built in. It is a living document that we use, and it is the one document that has everything in it. The learning contract, the midterm, and the final. So basically, in the first practicum, BSW students are expected to be at a beginning level of competence. However, by the end of the practicum, we expect students to meet all the expectations in all the areas. The grading choices for the midterm and final evaluations include meets expectation, so ME, needs improvement, NI, is not meeting expectations, and M. In terms of ME, we know that students are consistently demonstrating acceptable level of theory and skills, creativity, critical thinking, analytical skills, communication skills, professional and ethical behavior. In terms of needs improvement, the student is demonstrating a minimal level of theory and skills, creativity, critical thinking, analytical skills, communication skills, professional and ethical behavior. So they're demonstrating that there are some of those things there, but they need strengthening and building upon it. Basically, with not meeting expectations, the student is failing to demonstrate a minimal level of theory and skills, creativity, critical thinking, analytical skills, communication skills, professional and ethical behavior. As well, we ask field instructors to provide qualitative feedback on student performance in the comment and summary sections of the midterm and final evaluation. This could include their strengths and areas for future development and future learning. All of these things will be really helpful to students in planning for their future practicum as well as for their own development in their knowledge and skills in the field of social work. First, we'll be talking about the midterm evaluation. The midterm typically occurs at about week 6 of the practicum, so about the halfway point. The midterm evaluation is completed by the field instructor, typically in consultation with other team members, whether that be an agency mentor, volunteers, or clients if appropriate. The midterm evaluation will summarize the student's activities in the practicum, the student's strengths and areas for improvement, general level of student competence in regards to social work values, knowledge, and skills at that point of evaluation, plans for student activities and emphasis from the midterm to the end of the practicum, as well as students' needs for learning and development and requisite learning opportunities. Prior to the midterm evaluation, students are required to complete the midterm reflection, which can be found on the field education website. Students are required to submit this to their field instructor, typically about 1 week prior to the midterm evaluation meeting. The field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable, completes a draft and the midterm evaluation using the learning contract. A formal evaluation takes place, usually during a regularly scheduled field instruction session. This would include the field instructor and student and the agency mentor, if applicable. We usually recommend field instructors provide students with a draft of the evaluation 24 hours in advance of this meeting to give students the opportunity to reflect on the evaluation. Following the meeting, the field instructor would finalize the evaluation in IPT, and the student, field instructor, and agency mentor then electronically sign the evaluation in IPT. The midterm evaluation normally goes smoothly. However, every so often there are challenges for some students. So if at midterm you know the student is at risk of failing or there are struggles happening for the student, it must be acknowledged on the form in the appropriate section. The field instructor would clearly document them and discuss them with the student. The student has to be aware and sign. As well, the field liaison would also be aware, as this really indicates the needs for additional involvement with the field liaison, the field instructor, and the student. More than likely, the field liaison would then meet with the student and the field instructor. We would talk about any particular challenges and develop a plan together to try to overcome those challenges during the remainder of the practicum. This meeting is really crucial. The student needs to be aware of what the expectations are and what needs to be done. As well, we may also have to look at additional supports for the student outside of the agency itself. Maybe there are some issues that the student needs to address, and that has to happen outside of the agency. So the final evaluation obviously occurs at the end of the practicum, typically during the last week. The process for the final evaluation is similar to the midterm evaluation. The field instructor would write up a draft of the final evaluation and provide the student with some time to review it, often 24 hours in advance. The field instructor and student would then meet to discuss the final evaluation, typically during the final field instruction session. Usually when writing the evaluation, the field instructor seeks additional input from the agency mentor, other team members, volunteers, and possibly even clients. If the student has an agency mentor, the agency mentor would typically be present during the evaluation meeting as well. Although students are not expected to complete a reflection similar to the midterm reflection, students should come to this meeting prepared to discuss their progress in the 5 outcome areas. The evaluation doesn't need to be too lengthy. However, some questions the final evaluation usually address include: were all the goals met? Has the student completed the minimum expected outcomes? What are the final thoughts about the student and the practicum experience? What are the student's strengths? What are areas for student professional development? And suggestions for the next practicum. So what type of agency or client population may be good for the student to work with? What types of skills does the student still need to work on? What are some of the gaps in the student's knowledge? The evaluation may also address the student's suitability for the profession. Following the final evaluation meeting, the final evaluation must be signed and dated electronically in IPT by the student, field instructor, and agency mentor if applicable. It is also important to keep in mind that many field instructors often use the final evaluation as a foundation for future professional references. Having these additional comments are really helpful, not only for the student, but the final evaluation quite often will be looked at again in terms of the student's next practicum. A potential field instructor may say to us, how did they do in their first final evaluation? And it's an opportunity for the field team to go back and review their first final evaluation. So we do put a lot of value on the feedback provided in the final evaluation. So now we come to the evaluation of the agency and the field instructor. Of course, verbal feedback is provided by the student during the practicum. The student completes the evaluation of the agency and the field instructor after their final evaluation by the field instructor is submitted to the school. It is only shared with the field instructor if the student agrees, unless there has been a breach of the SCWK Code of Ethics. If the code is breached, then concerns must be addressed through the field liaison and the agency. At the end of the practicum, the field instructor or agency mentor will also have an opportunity to do an evaluation of the field practicum, and this will be completed in IPT. And this provides us with vital information about your feedback and experiences throughout the practicum, and we certainly appreciate any feedback that you provide. Throughout the practicum, we have asked students to be aware of the COVID-19 protocols at their agency, as well as abide by current public health guidelines. Students have also been asked to be aware of agency policies and procedures to become familiar with them and understand what they mean. CASW stresses the importance of confidentiality when working with clients. We have asked students to be respectful of confidential client information and handle it appropriately. We also ask that students be familiar with the social media policy and guidelines for social work students. Social media was never an issue years ago, but it certainly is now. So we have asked them to become familiar with the social media policy and take a look at their own social media and whatever they have out there in the World Wide Web and see whether or not it is appropriate. Private cell phone usage at the agency should not be occurring. We have asked students to keep in mind that if they wish to look at apps, check social media, or check personal email, etc., that should be done during their break time. We have also asked students to keep boundaries in mind and to think about what the Code of Ethics says in relation to boundaries. We've asked them to discuss any questions they may have about boundaries with their field instructor, staff at the agency, or their field liaison. It is important that students are dressed appropriately when they are at the agency. We've asked them to take the lead from their field instructor and from other agency staff. We've also asked if they're not going to be at the agency, that they please make sure they let their field instructor know and any appropriate staff that they have designated. We recognize as well that incidences occur in the community and that media may be interested. So we have stressed to students that their role as a student is to learn about the knowledge and skills that are required to be a successful social worker. Any media requests that they become aware of, they are to refer back to the agency and to the field instructor. They've been made aware of that it is not their job to discuss situations with the media. As well, this completely ties in the whole confidentiality policy through CASW, so we have asked them to be very mindful of these factors. We have reached the end of the orientation. Thank you for taking the time to listen in. We hope that it was helpful. I'm sure there's something we may have missed or topics you have additional questions about. If you have any further questions, certainly do not hesitate to reach out to a member of the field education team. You can contact our academic program assistant at socialworkfield@mon.ca. That's SCWK FIELD@mon.ca. They'll be happy to find out the answer for you or direct you to one of the field education coordinators, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you again.